just to give you a breakout of how things really happen. This is, imagine that, you're standing here and you're seeing this train here, and this train is emitting a lot of smoke. This represented the Industrial Revolution. And if you see the material that is used here, this is all glass. So this just a sketch to represent what Industrial Revolution stood for, right? It stood for a lot of pollution. It stood for mass production of these different materials. We'll take a look at what they are. And it also stood for a lot of innovation with respect to transport. The train coming in, the new materials getting invented. So the Industrial Revolution did see a major shift, and it was from, I think, the 18th and 19th century. The major changes even in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, transport, tech, and everything actually took place. So the Industrial Revolution, of course, took place in Britain and then subsequently spread throughout Europe and North America and eventually to the entire world. So when you look at Industrial Revolution, this forms the background of the changes that will happen in the near future. So there could be a machine like this, right? Which, of course, Industrial Revolution was famous for it's famous for the mass production of iron and steel, and your glass as well. Uh, of course, before we also look into more things, you can see that a lot of people are dependent on this one machine that is there. Now, this machine probably, it was the machine that actually mass produced cast iron. So you can see how many people work around that one machine. And of course, there's a lot of dependency on technology, and there's an impact of education here and Protestant Reformation. So if you see here, there is this whole thought that machines are taking over. Machines are the way to go forward, and there are a lot of inventions with respect to building materials as well: cast iron, wrought iron, glass, right? So all these are now the new building materials. And if you see, some of the ways how these are shaped, our ways of building. So this sketch is representative of the work environment during the Industrial Revolution, where you saw a lot of these people. Now the question is, where do these people come from, right? When you look at Industrial Revolution, I mean, in terms of there is this whole thing of what is good and what is bad. There are certainly good elements to Industrial Revolution, but there are also very bad elements which are still prevalent and seen today, right? First thing is, where do these people come from? And now you see that it's the same thing what we term as migration. Now during the Industrial Revolution, of course, there are a lot of people migrating from the rural to the urban areas, thinking it will give them a better life. And there is a lot more, there is this a lot more opportunities, and you can make a lot of money, is what the trend was. And a lot of people migrated from the rural in hope of actually getting a job. So now this lot of people migrating to a certain place leads to something what we call as an increase in population, right? So if a lot of people are moving from a certain village, say the rural, means there is something that is pushing them away from that place. What is that is pushing these people away from the rural? This is called as a push factor. So of course you will study in another subject what these push factors are. When you go towards urban and regional planning, you will see what the push factors are. And here what is getting sketched is, you can see there's a push factor and you can see a businessman standing there. So the ideal biggest push factor is a better life. And then when you look at an urban area, this is the second hand that is getting sketched. You look at an urban area, there is a certain pull from the urban area. So what is this pull? Is what we generally term as the pull factors. So overall, this was called as the push and pull factors that led these different factors, whatever it is, call it push and pull, led to a lot of people moving away from a village and moving to the urban. Now, because a lot of people are moving to the urban, what you see is that there is a higher influx of people now. The population is increasing in the urban, right? So this is the context you need to remember when we go towards modern architecture, that the population was increasing. Of course, here you can see this cartoon here. Basically, we had like a pipe piper somewhere sitting in the urban area, and they saw the rural as a potluck of people who would come and do their work for cheap, or what we call as cheap labor, right? There was a lot of exploitation that happened during the time, and it has led to, I mean, with time, if you see, there are a lot of laws that have changed around this, a lot of policies around it which have changed to prevent such a thing. But I mean, if you see India's context, this is still, we are still in this phase where there's a lot of exploitation happening. So the question from your side would be, what should change to prevent that? My answer would be it's design and policy mixed. So there's a lot of design that can be done. Yes, design can change certain stuff, but it's policies along with the design that actually change this particular factor. So let's just a recap. We started with Greek, we saw Roman, we saw early Christian, Byzantine, Romanesque, all the pre-Renaissance. So remember that that point in time, and post the European Renaissance, we saw the Renaissance movement, the Mannerism, Baroque, and Rococo, and saw Neoclassical. And now we are at this another important landmark called as Industrial Revolution, after which we see modern and postmodern. So just to recap some of the important points of Industrial Revolution, which you need to remember, because a lot of styles in the modern architecture are influenced by these important points that are getting written on your screen. So one is the shift from agriculture to industry, migration of people from village to city, increase in the production of steel, shift in functionality, because a lot of now residential buildings were getting sanctioned. So you can see a lot of preference. There was, in the ancient times, they were preferring to build cathedrals, churches, and all these religious buildings. But now we're looking at buildings that actually are non-institutional, which is residential, recreational spaces like parks, stuff, commercial spaces like malls, stuff like that, markets, and all. We're getting more preference. This is the one good part of the Industrial Revolution. They were getting more preference in terms of construction, and that itself was the precursor for a lot of changes. Now, if you look at modern, now what is getting sketched here is a zoomed in version of this part of the timeline. So here, imagine this part, this dot is this dot here. Right? This this red line is what is sketched here. So just before the red line, I couldn't write it here, so I have just zoomed it in here. This movement just before the red line. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, there were two movements, three movements that are very important for you all to be aware of. One is something called as for the machine movement. The other is what is called as against the machine movement. Now, what is for the machine movement is nothing but it's very direct to what it says. Because the Industrial Revolution was actually mass manufacturing a lot of these different materials. They were mass manufacturing iron, steel. So they felt like they need to use those materials so that they can mass produce their buildings. That was for the machine. Then there was a movement that said, hold on, there are a lot of artisans and craftsmen here. We don't need machine. Machine is just a tool, but we still need to place emphasis on the skills of the human craft, right? Which is what is the against the machine movement, and an important movement was Art Nouveau, right? So a good example of an architect who does Art Nouveau is Antonio Gaudi. If you look at his buildings, you will take a look at one example of his of how his forms were. You will understand by what it is impossible for a machine to do that, because they are not very regular in design. They're all changing everywhere and every second. So post the for the machine against the machine, this is the first step of modern. So just post the Industrial Revolution, the design was governed by functionalism. So remember, I asked you to remember that the one important point when there are a lot of migration of people happening from village to city, and there is a lot of new materials coming in and mass production of these materials. These are the important things that you need to remember. Now, this post the Industrial Revolution, it was run by this one word called as functionalism. We'll take a look at what that means. But this timeline you need to be aware of because this is modern architecture or modernism or the modern movement. Now, if you look, it is nice to be aware of this, at least this much. This much is for your understanding when we looked at from the past until pre-industrial revolution how style will change. That is for you to understand that it is not something of a new phenomenon or it is not a modern phenomenon that's happening. It's been happening for hundreds of years. It's the same thing, that has been happening, where every era we see some change in style. Now, what we are looking into from henceforth is the modern. So this is post the industrial revolution. There is this phase one. There are three phases of modernism. First phase is what we call as functionalism, and under there are two important movements there. There is Chicago and the Bauhaus movement. I'm sure you have seen both of it. If you have seen Louis Sullivan, you should be aware of Chicago movement, and you should be aware of Bauhaus as well. Both of them are under this one word, what we call as functionalism, out of which organic and prairie was derived. So Louis Sullivan was a mentor to Frank Lloyd Wright. If you have seen the video that is posted, I hope you're able to make that connect as to where Louis Sullivan actually stands in timeline, and this is actually where Frank Lloyd Wright also stands in timeline. So just a little before Frank Lloyd Wright was Louis Sullivan when he was in full swing with his career with the Chicago School of Thought, and he hired Frank Lloyd Wright into his firm, and then out of a lot of work and research, Frank Lloyd Wright coined the terms organic and prairie. So I hope you now understand where this organic and prairie school of thought sits. So it's basically a school of thought that is very close to Frank Lloyd Wright. And then post which we see Art Deco, and there is this another important landmark which we call as internationalism. And post it we have phase two and phase three. We'll look at phase two and phase three a little later.